and welcome to The Parallel Path. The Parallel Path is a podcast from the marketing team at Parallel Ag, bringing real conversations from across the agricultural industry. In each episode, we will sit down with equipment experts, service professionals, industry leaders, and farmers to talk about the challenges, innovations, and decisions shaping modern agriculture. From iron and uptime to technology and market trends, the Parallel Path focuses on the people and ideas that keep farms moving forward. Today's episode continues our Women in Ag series, but from a little different angle. Agriculture isn't just what happens in the cab or out in the field. There's an entirely different side of industry built around leadership, operations, and long-term decision-making that people never see. We're sitting down with Catie Beauchamp from KB Custom Ag to talk about her journey through food safety, protein production, agricultural leadership, and then moving on to joining the family operation to talk about what it's like being a woman working in ag. Catie, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I'm so happy to have you on our podcast, and I'm so excited to learn more about you. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Catie Beauchamp. I'm happy to be here. A little bit about me is I grew up on a hog farm and a row crop farm in northern Colorado and was involved in forage as a young kid. Like many farm girls, I think, aspired to be a veterinarian, went to, pre-vet, programming, and I found that it wasn't for me, right? It was a really cutthroat challenge in a community of very large group of people who wanted a small number of spots, and the kind of antics and those kind of things to get those spots weren't for me. I ended up working alongside a group of people that were ultimately part of the meat science program at Colorado State University. I was saying that the vibe check was there, right? They were a great group of really smart people, worked hard, played hard, ended up going into the meat science program at Colorado State. And, when I was there, had the ability to work in feedlots, followed cattle trailers. There are stories, but followed cattle trailers all over the United States, and then those cattle through packing plants. And by doing that, got to spend a lot of time in feedlots, understanding cattle transportation, the inner workings of packing plants. Got my first job in the meat industry, and just before that, met my husband at Colorado State University. And as I was going through graduate school, he was beginning KB Custom, and our first two employees lived with us on the couch. Started it from the ground up, and over the course of the years, we've learned a lot about how to do things right, how not to do things. A couple kids along the way, and I'm getting my own opportunity to be a 4-H mom. So thank 4-H moms. That's a whole lot. And that's me in a nutshell.
I'm just going to apologize right now. When you see me motioning off camera, it's because I have a child home today. So I'm over here directing her out of the room.
But also just wait till she starts fighting for her life with a fly. It's coming. I promise.
Why would you do that to me? Why would you jinx me?
I just know it's coming. This has happened for the last week and a half. Everything.
Yes. Every meeting, I'm over here doing one of these things.
You're all right.
So, were you on the meat judging team at Colorado State? Okay.
I did not know. that was on my path. It would have helped.
Okay. I just asked because I was on the meat judging team at Iowa State, and I was just wondering if our paths crossed. So
I did the live animal eval team my senior year, and I really enjoyed that. I would have really loved to be a part of it, but I didn't do it.
So I've got a question. Was agriculture always part of your plan, or did you just feel like you kind of had to find your way into it over time, as you got older?
It wasn't necessarily part of my plan. What I can say is that aside from, my dream of being a veterinarian, right? I really didn't have a hard plan of I'm always so impressed by 18-year-old kids who are this is what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I'm I had no idea. And so I think that's where I felt the most comfortable was, with people who are kind of speaking the ag language, if that made sense. But it wasn't this is where I'm going to stay. And really at each kind of fork in the road, took the opportunity that seemed the most, kind of had the best people involved and the most opportunity, and just worked really hard. But there was never there's hasn't not been a plan.
It makes me laugh because I was also pre-vet going into college.
Okay.
And then I did the first semester and I was like, that's not for me. So then I switched to ag business with the intention of going back to the family operation. And here I am 12 years later, being 4 hours away from the family operation, having nothing to do with production agriculture besides working
Right?
here at Parallel. % taking the forks as the
Yeah.
road leads me to.
See,
I
I always
honestly
wanted
think
to
there's less
do.
disappointment there. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always wanted to go back to the family operation, but at the same time, like I didn't exactly know where I fit into it because I have 3 brothers and our
Mhm.
operation was pretty small and it was still my grandparents' place. We were mostly just we were the hands, but we weren't running it, obviously. And when I went to college, I was pre-physical therapy and literally did that for 1 year. And then I went into sports broadcast, sports media, and was like convinced that's where I was going to go until like my last year of school. And one of my professors, my journalism professor, was like, "So here's the deal. You're great. You're great. But everything you've written about in the last semester has been agriculture. I think maybe we should look at something different." And I even worked with ESPN and Fox for like 3 years all through school. I did all that stuff. And yeah, so right out the gate, graduated college and went straight into agriculture. I was like, yeah, you're right. Better fit.
I always thought I'd live far away. I thought I would live like more in a city. My 16-year-old self would be disappointed, but here we are.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Amber has, hold on, because Amber has,
I need to know.
but your degrees are impressive because
true.
you did it all on your own, truly, and as a
Mhm.
full-time mom and everything.
Me?
Yeah.
You? Well,
Yeah.
thanks. And I was like, I'm going to college and I have 2 bachelors in business and graphic design. And I was a full-time student, worked full-time. I was a parent full-time while my husband was deployed and did that all by myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work, but I have easy kids. They were like, I'm not going to lie. My oldest, I had her when I was 17. So she was very, very helpful with my youngest. So it could have been a lot
Yeah.
worse.
And
But she's
between
got
the
to see
three
you
of us,
accomplish those things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
And she's
am
going to
very proud of
remember
myself.
having seen that
Mhm.
happen.
Yes. I
Yeah.
am very proud of myself. I definitely did not grow up or come from the same background as you guys or a lot of people that I have come into contact with since working at Parallel. So it is pretty nice.
But it
If we
does bring
wanna-
a good outside perspective because sometimes you need that to think
Yeah.
of new ideas and that kind of stuff. I love it.
Catie, why don't you talk about your path through food safety, protein production, like your PhD work, and how that all wound up tying into coming back to doing what you're doing today at KB Custom Ag?
Sure. So my PhD, my graduate work, my PhD work. So I worked on following E. coli and salmonella through from feedlot environment through the trailers, the holding pens, and then into the packing plant. And we evaluated like different interventions that would reduce E. coli and salmonella in those meat products. Looked at the influence of different sanitation programs, like the chemicals and then the cutting board type of surfaces and stainless steel on the reduction of salmonella and E. coli in those environments. And then also with listeria and meat products. So the death or destruction of listeria on specific meat products, mostly deli meat. So that was my graduate work. It was because of the type of program I was in, I was able to work on a lot of other projects, but those were where I was like the primary researcher on those. And did the reporting and those kind of things. And then so I did that work, and that gave me a really great level of experience. I don't think I realized how influential the advisors that I worked with at Colorado State were. You're just a kid. You're like, this one's kind of bossy, and this one, has a lot of feedback, and this one's particular. I had no idea the caliber of the folks that I worked with, and so I hate to say it, but I really stumbled into like a fantastic group of people that opened a lot of research doors for me, and I got a lot of experiences. And then, kind of when you're done with your program, you have to open your own doors. And so I started at a further processing plant, and I started as a QA manager. And I'm telling you, that is the hardest job I ever had. It was a tough job. It's you're in the plant at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sanitation reports to you. You're not the bearer of good news in any respect, right? People aren't glad to see you coming. It was tough. And I worked really, really hard to replace myself in that job. So hard. I ended up over time taking on research and development, compliance, food safety, quality, started a laboratory there, sanitation, and then we ended up having 1 plant, 2 plants, 3, 4, 5. So I was over the technical services essentially of those 5 facilities, and did that for 12 or 13 years. I loved that job. I loved being the technical liaison for, our customers and those types of things. I was kind of like the nerd on the bat phone people could call, and I loved that part of the job. And when I left there, the team was just amazing, right? It's kind of like worked yourself out of like, the team is great, wanted something different. I ended up consulting I had a couple clients. It was a lab, a fast food chain, a group that was building a packing plant in Amarillo, and ButcherBox. Those were my clients. Did that for a little over a year. And then I started full time with ButcherBox. When I was at ButcherBox, I did the same thing that I did at Colorado Premium, where I was R&D, technical services, quality assurance, food safety, and then was asked to take on supply chain operations. And so it was essentially, procurement was a different team, but our team was the group that did all of the work to, get the product produced. The product was then ordered, shipped. I learned a lot about corrugate. I learned a lot about cold storage. I learned a lot about transportation and freight and cold storages. It was a huge, it was a data, so much data. And it was systems and IT and software. And so for the first time, I had the IT group and the data group and then the logistics group and the quality group. It was like air traffic control and making sure we were getting, we would be marketing, and then we would have to basically execute what had been, ordered upon. And it was an awesome job, and it taught me a lot about, contracts and managing people it was the first time I'd managed people that I couldn't do their job. There was no way, if they left, I'm like, I am not going to run the data team. So that was a first for me. And then ultimately, in parallel, KB continued to grow and grow and grow. And we got, to the point in life where it's like, we're basically just we literally were having lunch at airports, right? And those kind of things. And we're like, this isn't going to work. And the business grew to the point where the things that I was doing from a business perspective could be supported, needed at KB. And so I joined KB, and both my husband and I were, we decided we can both pull the ripcord if this doesn't work. Either one of us could tap out and say this isn't working. But, so far so good. I haven't been fired.
How is it going working with your husband?
I think
because I couldn't do it.
Well, I think
Same.
we've been married a really long time, and we're pretty similar in some respects and pretty different in others. I'm a more people person, right? More of an extrovert, but we're both similar in the type of, neither one of us is type A, unfortunately. There's that. But I think we work okay together as long as we leave it at work, right? There are times where we disagree, or if we disagree at home, we don't bring it to work, right? We kind of have to where did that fight occur? Or argument or debate, and leave it wherever it was. And then what we really had to do was, kind of figure out where, which both of us, where we kind of shine and where we don't, and say, okay, I have a really distinctly different opinion of yours, but this is actually more of your wheelhouse. So I'm going to trust your decision making there, right? There's always the hard days, but I think it's so far. You might have to call him and ask him, but I don't, I think it's going okay.
Husband.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Phone a husband.
We trust
0
you.
stars.
That's
Would
okay.
not recommend. Yeah, I don't know.
How long have you been at KB? How long has it been since you've made the transition?
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
And I've been peripherally involved for a long time, right? And would get the team together for, team building events and those kind of things. But, so I worked remotely. So I worked in the office, and people would knock on the door and be like, hey, can I bounce something off of you? So I was involved in that capacity, but it's not the same as total immersion. We're okay. So about 2 years. Yeah, so we have, right around 50 harvesters. And from a full-time perspective, we have about 200 employees. And then from a seasonal workforce perspective, we'll staff up, several hundred above that, depending on the season. And then we typically work in, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Missouri, New Mexico, those contiguous states. And we harvest wet forage. So we're not dry harvester, we're a foraged harvester. And so we're going to be doing wheat, alfalfa, corn, sorghum, primarily.
What does the fleet consist of? Because we know we were in contact with you because you're a Parallel customer. So what does your equipment lineup look like?
Well, because of our equipment needs, we primarily use a cloth harvester, but from a fleet perspective, we're utilizing almost every make and model, from a pack tractor, all of our swathers, triple mowers, those types of things. We don't have a lot of, it's not that we don't have allegiance, I'm saying that wrong. We have to spread and diversify our fleet portfolio in order to be able to maintain it, service it, because we do have such a huge need that's pretty regionally concentrated. So, we're Massey, we're Fendt, we're John Deere, we're Claas, we're all over the place from a equipment perspective. And there is intentional decisions made about each, make and model that we source. But a lot of the decision making goes into, where our service providers are located and how much support they can offer, right? When we have, 20 plus units, right? It can overwhelm, any, service provider. So we do have to diversify, our fleet portfolio.
Have you driven any of the equipment? Have you ever been out there operating it?
It will be a very bleak day if and when I am asked to do anything but swath. So they will let me swath. They will let me get parts. But that is it. That is all. Maybe I can drive a fuel truck or, like a heavy mechanic truck. That is all. Like, I cannot.
Do you want to drive others? Like, do you want to try, or is it just like a hard, nope, I'm done here?
So when I was 16, I helped my father with harvest, and I would drive my truck into the grain elevator, and my name was Hop Along for obvious reasons. Because me and the clutch in said truck were not friends. And when I was 17, the summer I was 17, the elevator actually called my father and said it would probably be a benefit to both of us if we hire her to run the scale house. And that's what I did. And those days, right? So they would rather me do the paperwork and manage traffic versus physically drive or operate anything. That's never changed.
That's okay. That's okay.
Everybody has their place.
It's embarrassing, but
Yeah.
Everyone has their strengths.
Right? That is, yes.
Listen.
Operating equipment is not it.
I was a precision ag tech for a little while,
Okay.
but I was in the cab because if you put me behind the cab and expect me to run electrical harnesses, I will get shocked.
That's fair.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And my kids think it's hilarious because I'll do all of the plumbing. I'll do all of the housework here, except for electricity, because I will get shocked. Electricity and I do not get along. It's been that way my entire life. I can't tell you the amount of times I've strung hot wire and had the socks about knocked off of me because I just don't get along.
Play to your strengths.
That's
Play
right.
to your strengths.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to side tangent here on shocking myself. Salem and Amber have not heard this story. So my husband's aunt was a sergeant. There's the fly. Sergeant in the Illinois State Trooper. And when she retired, she gave my husband one of those flashlight stun guns. And our electricity went out one night. And so I'm frantically looking for a flashlight. And I am digging through stuff. And he had this. You guys all know where this is going. He had this flashlight tucked in the back drawer of our office desk. And I'm like,
Please tell me this is going where I think it is.
I'm like, yes, I found a flashlight. So I go to flip it on and I'm like shaking it, trying to get it because I can't get it. Let me tell you, I met Jesus and peed my pants that night because I stun gunned myself with that flashlight. Mess with electricity or things that can shock me because it will happen.
For the record, you should tell that story more often. I'm upset that's the first time I've heard that.
Note to self on where to store the stun guns. We have hot shots, so noted.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I have definitely been hit with the hot shot a handful of times.
Yes, 100%.
But to be fair, I have hit my brothers with it a whole lot more.
I don't know what a hot shot is. What is that?
Hot prods
So it's
that-
also known as like a cattle prod.
Oh, okay. I know what it is.
Yeah.
It's a cattle prod. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does your typical day-to-day look like now?
It differs. Every day is different, which I like. I actually really enjoy. I do try and spend about half of my time working on the business and half of my time working in the business. It's not always possible. I'm working on typically, systems. So like what type of software do we have, communication systems, what, from an organizational perspective, who's doing what How are they doing it? Where do the balls drop? I work with some of our customers and some of our clients, our vendors, sorry. But a lot of what I do is the stuff that other people don't want to do, right? Or the stuff we have to do one time. So we're doing it one time. There isn't really a clear person to give it to. It's just like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so, from a daily perspective, it's a lot of contracts, contract negotiations. If we have new people, making sure that they're, kind of like plugged in to what they're working on. We've seen a lot of growth over the years. And so, managing the growth is kind of a constant process of taking something away from someone, giving to someone else, or giving, adding on to someone. And so that's a lot of what I do, is just from an operational perspective, who's working on what and what tools do they have.
What are some parts of your job maybe that someone outside the operation wouldn't realize is actually happening behind the scenes?
A lot of what I do is being curious about how we're doing something, right? And making sure that everybody has the information that they need. So it probably looks like I just chat with people all day, right? I would like to go back to all my teachers and say, I do get paid to talk all day, by the way. Just saying, it's an option. But a lot of what I do is just like transferring information from person to person and deciding, does it have to be a meeting? Is it not a meeting? And then kind of connecting the dots across people. Like, this person doesn't appear to know that this thing is happening, but they're pretty instrumental in it. So I think from the outside looking in, I don't know if someone could say this is what she does all day. And there's times where you go home and you're like, I don't even know what he did today. But sometimes it's just weeding out, does this step need to happen, or do we need a new software for this, or those types of things. So I think that's probably what someone from the outside looking in would say, is this, I just seem to chat with people all day.
So if you're looking at your operation or somebody else's operation, say maybe you've got a consultant position, right? What would be a few of the things that you would notice right off the bat that somebody else might miss?
I think the biggest thing of interest for me is whether or not people in the business know why they're doing what they're doing, right? Not what they're doing, but why they're doing it, and not one question deep, but 3 questions deep. And so I think that would probably stand out for me is, does the first person that you talk to know why they're doing what they're doing 3 questions deep? If they don't, and I'm not saying that everyone on our team does either, right? It's always an area of opportunity, but ultimately we are a service provider, right? For clients that, feed silage or forage to livestock or dairy cattle, right? And if 3 questions deep doesn't lead you to the fact that we create forage for somebody and they don't really actually know what their role in that is, or for the people who are directly involved in that, right? That is problematic. So I think that might be what stands out to me is, for any business, do the people in that business know why you're doing what you're doing and how their fingerprints will kind of impact that, ties together. And I think that that's one of the things that's commonly missed in businesses, is that people kind of divorce themselves away from the why you're doing it. It really becomes very, kind of like, you have people who are really like compliance oriented or those types of things. And not saying compliance is that you need those people, but you also need them to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that why there might be pressures on their role, right? Not that they give up in service of that pursuit, right? But they have to know this is what's coming at my role because of what we do.
So now the core of our podcast is the women in agriculture. Have you ever ran into an issue where your gender has made people underestimate you?
Yes, I think I've had overall like really positive experiences. I had a series of bosses, right, that were not progressive in the sense of like how we talk about progressive in current times, but more in that they didn't see me as a woman or a young woman. It was more about, they had, high expectations of me, and they also aligned me with the things that I needed to do my job well. So I was really lucky in that I had great bosses, and all were men. What I will say though is that I did have trouble in the beginning with 2 things. One is coming into the meat industry with a PhD. I kind of had this assumption that people would be like, oh, great, And I got a lot of, had a lot of really unfortunate experiences where I had to prove myself that I was not some desk jockey brainiac that didn't know what I was doing. And I kind of had to get your hands dirty, literally. You had to get in there, you had to work hard, solve problems kind of shoulder to shoulder with people. And so I had a lot of work in that capacity too. And then from a female perspective, there were a couple meetings that stand out where I'm in a meeting and it's all my peers and someone says, "Hey, can you make coffee?" And to this day, I'm like, I can't believe I did it, but I was like, I don't drink coffee. And I can't believe I did it.
I love it. Top tier response.
And
Yes.
everybody was super quiet and no one drank coffee. But the next meeting, the coffee was already made. I have no idea by whom.
Not you. That's who.
But it wasn't by me.
That's right.
And I had a second meeting where it was a group where I was presenting to the group and someone in the meeting said, "Catie, can you scribe for this meeting?" And I'm like, how am I supposed to present and at the same time?
Yeah.
And it really did frustrate my boss. And he's like, "I'll be the scribe." Now, granted, he didn't take any notes, so it was not helpful, but there was a series of a couple maybe pivotal points, right? Where not really knowing like what that, downstream effect might be, whether it was positive or negative. There was a lot of, I think one of the biggest early consequences or, that I learned from is that I do think that young women specifically might have that tendency to want to answer questions or fill the void of an uncomfortable conversation and talk through it. And I really found the power of the pause was really important to say, like, this is uncomfortable. I'm not going to solve this discomfort for you. It's like not my job. And like letting the pause just be there until you could move past it, whether or not like I'm not making the coffee or this is a problem and we have to move forward from it. Those were things that I learned early on, but I would say that I had some opportunities, like that, but I had many, many more that were, positive, and having children. I remember the first business meeting I was at where someone said, "Who's with your daughter?" And, and my boss again was so annoyed with the conversation. He was like, "Who's with your kids?" He was like, "Why are you asking this?" And
props
we
to
actually
that boss,
ended up.
truly.
I know. I was gonna say,
he's
I
a
love
cool
that
guy.
you had a supportive boss.
I did, and I remember once he had said to someone who was just being really kind of obnoxious about, "I can't believe you can travel with children," and and he's like, "Oh yeah, she just locked him in a hotel room and threw some Cheerios on the floor, and she's just hoping for the best. So let's TikTok, and
hurry up."
I think that person was like, okay, that was probably an appropriate statement. But I was really found myself to be surrounded by people who demanded a lot from me, which was, I think, important and didn't like make it because of a gender or something that I could or couldn't do something, which I would really push people to search for. Like not where, you're given all these concessions, right? It's like you want people to challenge you and push you.
Yeah,
and it really isn't
100%.
about who you are, from a man or woman perspective.
So I do agree that I think, especially some of the young women coming out straight out of school, definitely feel that need to just do the small stuff to just get it over with. Like if someone asked them, "Hey, can you make some coffee?" They would just be like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." But part of the problem with doing that is once you set that precedent, it's going to be expected later on, and it's just going to become other tasks and everything. So what would your advice be for some young women coming out of school, like you're talking about, to look for that boss, find someone that's really going to empower you or whatever, push you, but not expect it because you're a woman? What would be some things that you would encourage them to do to find that boss?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you have to do is, first of all, you can't want your employer or your peers to not treat you like a woman. And I don't mean to say like that's derogatory, right? But like treat you differently because you're a woman. But you also can't be expected to have to do different things because you're a woman, right? Like I wasn't going to make the coffee, but I was going to walk out and prime the sanitation pumps, right? Because I was in charge of sanitation. I wasn't going to go find a man to prime my sanitation pumps, right? Because I'm a woman, right? And I wasn't going to make coffee because I was a woman. And so I think what you have to do is show up in a way that you're saying, like, I'm going to do the full capacity of this job, right? Regardless of what I may or may not know how to do. And then I'm going to find if these are my people because of that, right? And if you show up the right way and the people around you aren't, like you're in the wrong spot. But I would caveat that by saying one of the best decisions I made was taking a really hard job first, like the first thing out of school, because I learned so much in that job. I learned when people are lying to you. I learned, about, anything that could possibly go wrong, right? I learned where it goes wrong, like those types of things. I learned how to have hard conversations with people. I learned how to manage people. And so a hard job is what you should look for. You got to show up in a way where you're not, kind of like excusing yourself from things because you're a woman. And you got to find people who are willing to say, I demand the most out of you in this hard job. And I'm also going to treat you with like the same level of respect I would treat anyone else.
Right. Like proving
with the role
yourself
that
in
you're
the position, proving yourself in the position as an employee, not as a woman, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. It's like, I'm not going to be the one that goes and cleans the conference room before guests come, right? Like I'm getting the presentation ready for the guests, right? Like go have someone else clean the conference room, right?
Yep.
Those are the kind of conversations, right, that I think people have to be willing to have.
And I will say on that point, it was very helpful for me growing up in the situation I did. So I had 2 sisters and a brother, and my dad, growing up on a family farm, we weren't treated any different than my brother. We had the exact same expectations for us as my brother did. So we changed the oil. We helped, we ran the tractors. We were able to help put the headers together for harvest. And that carried me through into my role in selling seed and selling and being in precision agriculture, because like you said, I went out there and I did the dirty work. And the first time I went out and helped a customer pull planter boxes and dump them out, they were shocked that I knew how to do it, number one. Number two, that I was willing to literally get in there and do the dirty work. So you're right. You have to be able to put aside your gender and not use your gender as an excuse to get away with not doing the hard stuff.
I've probably said this every podcast already, but similarly, I grew up with 3 brothers and on the family farm and everything like that, and also ran the equipment. I ran the wheat truck, all those things. And I was not one time treated differently within my family on the operation, friends, coaches, anything. I was never treated differently just because I was a girl.
And I do think I see a lot more female faces in ag, consistently every year. What I don't see is, people in like maybe those like more senior positions. I think it's because maybe in years' time, as people, can like mature in their careers, you'll see more of those faces, but there are fewer and fewer. And I think that I've personally had really good experiences. But and it is a field that is more male dominated. I think that there's definitely, from a broadcasting perspective, I didn't have that type of experience.
Now, being my background also, because I've had like crazy experiences, I have been in those packing plants and being on the meat judging team. Have you ever navigated an environment that was not built with a woman in mind? Like when I sold seed, it was all geared towards men. Like there was never a woman's bathroom or like things like that. Have you navigated a situation like?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that how do I say this? Because I think one of the things that I saw that was actually the hardest is that there's still a family dynamic. Like we want to go to the workplace and we want to be treated equally. And then we go home and we might have very different obligations, right? At home, from a mother versus, a husband or a father. And so what I would see is that we would start shifts and you had to be there, and the shifts would last as long as the shifts lasted. Whereas, maybe it's a shift that a woman took because the shift gets off at 2:30, right? And they can go to school. But if you're working overtime, you have to stay till the shift is done. Or if it's a snow day, or if it's a delayed start day, and you're a woman and you get, those consequences for being late, and you get a consequence for leaving early. But your family dynamic requires that it's you. And as an employer, it's like, well, we can't just make it, well, women can come late and leave early and men can't, right? And so on the employer side and on the employee side, there was this big known issue. And I was like, well, how do you solve it? And so I think that there are times in that respect where you just, it's not designed with like women's kind of like holistic life obligations in mind. Certainly, like you said, like nursing rooms, like I think we're starting to catch up. I think COVID forced an industry, many industries actually, to, like address the needs of employees, because all of a sudden those people were either not coming to work and they had a little bit more, they were in the power seat. So that's catching up. But yeah, I think there are times where there's not that acknowledgement of like, okay, I want to be challenged. I want to come to work. I want to have the same expectations. I also am, nursing and my kids have snow day. Well, like, what am I going to do? So those things stood out to me the most. And there's also issues where it's like, you can't have a phone. Like you can't have a phone on the plant floor. I think we're all parents here, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I have never had a role where someone told me, go to work, do not take your phone. You at lunchtime can go to your locker and see if your kid called. That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the gender mix? What's the gender mix for you there at KB Custom? Like, do you have a decent representative of women there that work for you?
I would say, so we have kind of different, kind of like areas in our company. So from like our harvesting perspective, it's open to women. We don't see a lot of women apply. And we also then from a housing perspective would be an opportunity that we want to address from a housing perspective. But so our seasonal workforce is primarily men. And typically, they're leaving home and their spouse is staying at, home and raising family. For our full-time support, I would say that across the business, we're probably in our like shop area, warehousing and those kind of things, our mechanics is still very, very men centric. Outside of that group, we're probably more women than men. So we have, women in almost all of our data positions. Our programming positions is a blend of men and women. Our finance team, more women than men by a significant degree. HR women, and a couple men. Are like even our administrative team, where you might expect it to be women, is actually 50-50 men and women. So I think we're actually more female heavy on the KB side for full-time employees. If you don't look at the mechanics, we do have some female mechanics, but fewer.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's awesome. You don't see that very, we don't have any female mechanics in our company.
No.
And again, not because the opportunity is not there, just there's
It's
not
just
the
as
interest,
rare.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this number is probably very high. How many times have you walked into maybe a meeting or something along the lines and there's a dozen men and you're the only female, just out of curiosity?
Enough that I don't notice anymore.
Okay.
Right? I don't like.
Yeah.
I think more often than not, I see more and more women, but especially now on the harvest side, it'll be all men, specifically with our vendors too.
Yeah.
We'll see a lot of where I'm the only female, but I don't notice anymore. It's so often.
Yeah.
I don't notice it anymore walking into a room full of men, mostly because I feel like I've earned my place in the industry where I'm at now. And also, I work from home the majority of the time, so I ain't going into any meetings.
So you're the only person. You
That's
are
right.
100% women.
Me, myself, and I, and my
All
8-year-old that keeps running around back here.
And the fly.
Yep.
And the fly.
That's awesome.
All right. So when you're looking at dealing with customers and vendors, what matters? What separates a good experience from a frustrating one? What do you look for in a partner for your business?
I think it's a really great question. I would say that how I would have answered this a couple years ago would be different, but what I've come to realize and really value is I've been on the customer side, I've been on the vendor side, I've been in the middle, where I had both, is that I think what separates a good experience from a bad experience is when the expectations meet the outcome, right? And not just the end, right? Like where it's like, okay, at the end of the day, we got to where we were going. It really does begin start at the beginning of that experience, whether it's a seasonal harvest, whether it's the beginning of a new relationship that you had a new contract about, whether it's I'm creating a new product for you, I'm delivering this new fleet, from a seasonal perspective, and we've been beating each other up on pricing, all winter long, right? Like whatever that looks like. But as long as the expectations and the outcome align and you felt like you were like working together along the way to get there, I think that's a good experience, especially if, and then I would also say there's a difference between a vendor and a partner, or like a client and a partner. And the way that I look at that is saying in every negotiation, I used to have a boss that would tell me every successful negotiation for it with a partnership means that both parties left something on the table. You both came away with more that you could have taken, right? And more, more that you could have given, but you both walk away, with what you need, left something on the table. That's a partnership, right? And a vendorship is like where you just, you're only after what you need and you don't really care on the other side, right? And you would switch to, sides to a different vendor or a different client, right? With ease. And so I think that's important, that you weather through disappointments and like the wins together. Like both parties share those disappointments and those wins in some respects. And ultimately, whether it's a dealer, whether it's a vendor, the purpose of those groups is really to, how do I say it? Like kind of reduce the mental strain of their client. Your whole job is to say, what is your problem? What am I solving for you? Right? And like I'm giving you back like mental capacity because of what I do for you. And that every one of your clients, whether you're a dealer, whether, you're a harvester, whether you're, meat packer, whomever you are, right, they all have different needs. And if you treat everybody the same, right, it's not as effective. From a dealer perspective, you might have a client whose biggest challenge is financing. You might have a client whose biggest challenges is seasonal servicing. Each one of your clients has different needs, and like you have to meet them where they're at and solve that need, and that becomes a partnership. Similarly, from a client perspective, like on the harvesting side, right? Each one of our clients has a different reason that they utilize our services, right? And if we don't know what those are, and if we don't stay in tune with how that changes over time, eventually you're doing what you've always done and you've always been good at, but you're no longer solving their problem. Like we might produce the very best silage that they've ever had, but if we didn't tell them that we were coming to start swathing, right? And all of a sudden, their office manager and their farm managers are furious because they didn't know this was coming, right? Am I happy about how harvest went? I am not. Right. And so the expectation meeting the outcome, right, is I think really important. And ultimately, we're all here, no matter what your job is, right? You're here to basically solve a problem for someone. And
So
if you're not solving it, you're creating more problems than you're solving.
you are the problem.
You are the problem.
I am the
So-
problem. It's me.
When those relationships, maybe there are some issues or things are just really busy, really stressful, not going according to plan, what does good leadership look like to you in handling those?
I think good leadership is facing the problem head on. And you have to decide, am I the problem? Is the problem a misunderstanding? Right? But I think there's a lot of times where you'll talk to someone and it's like, okay, we failed on this particular small proportion of the business, right? We had a failure. And a lot of times what people, specifically in operations, will say is like, we did X volume of this and we messed up on this volume. I can't believe they're mad, right? It's like the law of averages. It's basically I got an A-, right? I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's the way they're looking at this, right? And so you have to counsel your own team or maybe your own self, right? To say, did you reduce the mental strain of said person by this challenge, right? Like maybe it is a small proportion, but you don't know how big of a problem you caused. Then you have to have a hard conversation. And if you go into a hard conversation defending the failure versus basically saying like, I'm sorry, like tell me what happened. Tell me what transpired for you, right? Like maybe it feels this big to me, but it's huge to you. Just tell me. And I think if you meet someone's anger with calm and you say you're sorry and you hear them out, that feels like a partner, not like a transactional relationship. And that's what leadership looks like, I think, is saying like, hey, as an owner, a leader, or account manager, you might understand why this person's mad and your team might think it's stupid, but they have to understand too, right? Like, hey,
Right.
this is what happened. We caused this.
So, how would you approach growth without letting safety, quality, and culture slip?
Sure. I think people respond to your reactions in a way that people don't always maybe take into consideration. So, say someone says, I screwed up, and your reaction is to flip out. It's unlikely that that person is going to tell you willingly and
Right.
repeatedly that they failed, right? And when you're growing, the unfortunate part of it is that you're growing because there's either something new to do, there's more to do than you planned on, like you are stretching when you grow, no matter what, right? And so the opportunity for mistakes is higher, and you can either learn from your mistakes, be able to like beat them up, hash them out, solve it, or you can find out about them when it's like really, really bad. So I think first and foremost, you have to like present yourself in a way that people are going to tell you about a mistake or that they're worried or something like that, right? And then two is that when you're growing, I think there could be times where different groups within a business have more to do than they can do, whether that's the safety group, whether that's the finance group, whether it's the operations group, kind of depends on where you're growing. Ultimately, what happens is that people follow your intensity. And so like if you're not intense about what you need, right, they're going to choose their own path, right? And it causes more chaos. And so there are times where you have to just be like, no, stop what you're doing, do this now. And so I think you have to be calm when you're receiving news of failure, and you have to be intense about directing people towards the right activity while you're growing. And that is kind of like how you, I think, manage like the growth from a culture perspective. Culture is a hard word, right? Like, what does culture mean, right? Is culture that everyone's happy? Is culture that, we work hard, play hard? What's the culture? And I think that you have to decide what your culture is. And culture isn't what you say it is. Culture is about how you respond to things that happen, right? Or don't happen. And so I think that, in order to protect culture, the biggest thing that you do is you're going to add new people. And if they aren't a culture fit because they don't have it, they're not accountable, or, those types of things, they have to go, right? You have to like take people out of your business that change the culture in a negative way, even if they're really, really good at what they particularly do. And then from a safety perspective, safety is either can be managed poorly by someone who's in charge of operations, where it's like, I'm going to, I know what I should do, but I'm going to make decisions that are in favor of getting something done. Or I'm going to grow, and now I'm going to have a person who's in charge of safety that is removed from the process, but they're making a procedure, right? And I think the sweet spot is somewhere in between, where the person is familiar with operations, but they can compartmentalize that urgent crisis feeling of like, I have to. It's like, I have to accept, right? I can't push it past this limit. And they also can say like, I understand we need a process and we need a procedure and it's something more formal, but they understand actually operationally what's happening. They've spent more than an hour there. They're like boots on the ground. They're seeing it. And I think that as you grow, what happens is that sometimes you have that first group, right, where it's like they're everything, their operations, their safety, or you like give it to someone else and their safety, and they're this like bubble in this bubble. And safety is their job. Safety really does have to be addressed by everyone. And that's a culture piece, right? Where it's like they might be the best mechanic or the best, shop supervisor you've ever had, right? They could diagnose anything. But if they ultimately don't care about safety, they have to go, right? Yeah. And I think that that's kind of what brings it full circle is you can say we care about safety, but if you're letting this influential person continue to like deprioritize safety, then it's just words. Like you're just saying words. You're not actually living out from a culture perspective what's important to you. So I think that's how you protect it.
I mean, at that point, it's not just a liability to your shop. I mean, I don't want to use the word toxic, but it bleeds into other people. And so then before you know it, you've got a tech that's doing it. And then 3 months later, you've got 3 techs that are doing it. So yeah, I see what you mean.
Safety-wise, what's something that needs to be taken more seriously in the industry?
I think from a harvesting perspective specifically, I think that what can be taken more seriously is just, there's road safety, right? We got road safety, we got vehicle safety, we got equipment safety. And I think that the challenges are really, in my opinion, it's not in the things that you do. That it's like even like working cattle, or when you're doing something once a year, or you're doing it every single day, you can kind of take it for granted. Those are the two areas where we see like the most events. It's not the things that you like have a healthy respect of and you're doing it like when we're sharpening knives on a chopper, right? Like we don't do it every day, right? But we do it consistently, and it's like this is a thing. Like we're safe doing this well, but it's like there's more issues with people just getting in and out of tractors and trucks, with like 3 points of contact, right? So I think that the challenge is, how do you bring attention and awareness to the things that you almost never do and the things you always do, right? That is something that continues to be something that is an opportunity. And then I think as you get, smaller and smaller, and from an entity perspective, right, you kind of learn from each other versus, like this is how we've always done it. And so I think that those are areas of opportunity to say, like, there's a lot of ways to say, like, how do we educate ourselves of like the risks that could happen, but the handoffs of a job, right, like at the pile, right, where it's like one team is dumping, one team's packing. Whose pile is it? Like that junction, right? That's where you can see issues. Like when I'm leaving a field onto the highway, right? That's when you can see. It's like when you're stopping one process and starting another, and either handing it off to a different person, or you're kind of like starting like a different part of the chain of progress. Those are the like the places where issues can happen, right? Because it's like no one's in everyone's area at the same time. So I think those are the places for focus, is transitions, and then those things that we get really accustomed to are kind of like autopilot, or someone's doing something for the first time and they've never done it.
We touched on this a little bit. Talk about, how are you raising, I believe you have 2 daughters, correct? How are you raising those daughters in this industry? How are you setting them up for success? What are your expectations for them?
I think I don't know. I read a book when they were really young, and my oldest was really young, and it was about where little boys, like, you let them jump off high things, and like you don't tell them to be careful, but with daughters you tell them to be careful. And if boys are loud, or if they kind of like they don't want to hug grandma, or they maybe say something a little snarky, you're not like, you be polite, you be kind, you go say sorry, right? And so what I've tried to do is say, like, would I handle that situation differently if they were a boy, right? Like, yeah, you can jump off the roof of the chicken coop, okay, because I would let a boy do it. And no, if you don't want to hug and you don't want to, you needed a snack and you had a rude tone of voice, I'm gonna let it ride, with the girls. So I think some of that is the way we've decided to raise the girls. And I also think that, we've immersed them in the business. You kind of just, I think that's how we all, ended up, experiencing life, is through where you go with your parents. I got my earbud. And so I think we just want them to see it, and we don't expect them to work in the business, but what we want them to do is job worth doing is worth doing well, right? No matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you want to be an art teacher. It doesn't matter if you want to, work in this business. Do it well. And I personally think that 4-H, I'll give a plug for it. I think it's kind of like a dying level of enrollment, which makes my heart sad. Some of the most phenomenal employees I've had at a very young age, have come through the 4-H program, and I think you handled disappointment early in public. Nothing like getting last place in front of 500 people, right? It's like at 9. And so, I think you handle disappointment well. I think you have to work hard. You have to get your fingers smashed in a gate and walk into a show ring. I mean, it's just a lot of life skills, right? And so we've decided, like, we are so busy, and 4-H, like, wow, that website's hard, but we really want our kids to do it. And I think that that's been a real growth curve for them, is just doing things in the public eye. Like, all of the things that you worked on all summer, you get one day to kind of put it on display, and like, everyone's going to know if you shirked your work. Your lamb's going to jump right out of the show ring, actually. And so I think that for us has been one of the things that we've made a decision to invest in, because you're not going to make money at it, and it's a lot of time commitment.
I'm a 4-H mom, and it is not optional for my kids. Like, they are all in
Right.
4-H. It is not
It's true.
optional, and you're right, 100% right. The most dedicated people I know have been involved in an organization like FFA or 4-H
I
because
agree.
you literally live the life experiences from the age of
Yeah.
8 or 9 on.
Public speaking, I mean, they require you to do public speaking.
Yep.
It's like, I really do feel like, and then the community, right? Like, there's not a lot of places where you're just going to let your kid run around, and
Unsupervised
not know
for 3
exactly
days
where they
straight.
are, right? Eat snow cones for 11 hours straight. But I think it's just, that is one of the things that from a commitment perspective, I feel like does help a lot of people have feedback for your kids, right? Which is good. It's not all just you.
What do you have for advice entering ag or technical roles?
Sure. I think my advice would be to take a really high interaction job with like the industry that you're working with first, right? So as much hands-on experience as you can get seeing how things are really accomplished, right? I think is really impactful. Those experiences have really served me for almost 20 years, right? Those experiences that I had those first 2, 3, 4 years. And it was hard because you're taking a job where you're not wearing nice clothes, you're not if you have a peer group where maybe that you've graduated with or those kind of things, like someone's going to like a credit agency and someone's doing these things. I'm not saying that like that maybe that's the route for you, but like if you're at the credit agency, do the hands-on work at the credit agency, whatever that looks like, right? Get in there, right? Like you got to figure out how like the sausage is made no matter where you go, and do the grunt work, like work hard. I know it sounds like crazy, but I would say like screw work-life balance in the first several years of I don't know if I can say that, but in the first years of the first years of your career, right? Just throw it out the window. Work as hard as you can, be as part of as many projects as you can, because the goal is to learn, get all the good out of those hours that you put in, right? And then replace yourself and get yourself to a job where you don't turn the lights on every day, right? Like, you want a job where someone else turns on the lights and off the lights. You don't be in charge of payroll. Don't be in charge of those things that have to happen on a day, right? You want to take the snow day, right? You want to be able to do those types of things, but you want to do it in a way where in those years, you really ground it out. And then you work yourselves away where you're still involved, but you're not turning the lights on and off. I think that's, for me, first advice. Hire people that intimidate you, right? Like, do not underhire, right? There was a pivotal moment where I was looking at a stack of resumes, and there was this person that I was like, they're going to fire me if I hire this person. Like, this person has forgotten more than I know. And I hired him. It was the best thing I ever did. He was phenomenal. He allowed me to work myself out of that job. I did it again and again and again. And ultimately what you want is a team of people who, in their very specific role, they do their job better than you could, right? That's what makes you good at your job. And then, as you have the opportunity, do not underhire. Like, stretch, let yourself be uncomfortable, right? It will be good for you, right? And you have to trust, the people around you to see your value in being able to do that. Never stop asking questions. There are going to be a time where you get in the room and everyone's 20 years older than you. They've been doing it longer, and they say something that makes no sense. And you're just going to be like, I'm sure it's just me. Right? Ask the question. You'll be shocked at how many people will be like, I'm so glad you asked because I didn't know either. Right? There is a lot of times where people just put on a game face. If you don't know what's being talked about in a room you're in, stop the conversation, ask the question, because you're in there for a reason. You're never going to learn if you couldn't follow half the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? My last one is, don't ever make the coffee.
I love that one.
And that is our soundbite.
Yep. So past surface level, what's something that you wish more people understood about agriculture and the industry?
I think it's hard for people who don't work in agriculture to be able to like actually conceptualize that if a person loses their job, that's like where their home is. That's like everything. Not many people work in a field that is attached to their home, that is attached to their fields, right? And so it's hard not to take things, very personally. It's hard not to be emotional about it. And so I think that agriculture is science, it's logic, it's emotion, right? And when you put all that together, if people weren't so emotionally invested in their work, ag would not be as successful as this, right? Like it just wouldn't. People work through some of the hardest problems a business owner or a person in their field could have because of how emotionally they invested they are and like how many facets of their life it involves. I don't think people understand that necessarily if they're not immersed in ag.
Well, we normally wrap this up with Salem doing a rapid fire questions. Salem, do you have a list?
I do have some. Rapid fire, don't think long answers, just first thing that comes to your mind. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear family business?
Dysfunction.
I love that.
I love that.
That's great. Top tier, starting off fantastic.
Yes.
What's harder, working with family or working around the Texas weather?
Texas weather.
Yeah. Who in the family is most likely to say, we'll figure it out?
All of us.
Type B.
Yeah.
What's that one sound you hear on the job that immediately gets your attention and you're like,
well, probably the IT team next, because I work in the office, right? The IT team I share well, and when they say, oh, it's oh no.
What's one safety habit that you wish everyone treated as a non-negotiable?
Clean windshields.
That's a good one. What gets sacrificed first when the schedule gets packed?
Say that again.
What gets sacrificed first when the schedule gets packed?
Lunch, eating.
Yep.
We can all relate.
Yeah, definitely.
That's absolutely fair. All right, I just have a handful more. These will go faster. Would you rather have perfect weather and a breakdown or rough weather but everything running right?
Rough weather, everything running right.
Would you rather spend all day in the field or all day handling phone calls?
I would rather spend all day in the field.
Would you rather be short on time or short on help?
Short on time.
Would you rather have a customer call at 6 a.m. or 11 p.m.?
6 a.m.
Would you rather deal, this is kind of like the other one, would you rather deal with a surprise weather change or a surprise equipment issue?
Weather change.
Do you ever actually clock out in a family operation?
No.
All right. What has KB Custom, specifically moving into the family operation, what has that taught you about patience?
Well, probably the most of any job I've ever had. And I think I have to be patient. There are times where people bring me a problem that seems like a small problem to me. But if I minimize their problem, they don't care about it anymore. And I need them to care about it. So I have to be like, tell me, and I will help you. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the hardest part.
Okay. I have 3 questions left. That's it. What is something your family operation does the old school way, but for a good reason?
All of our invoicing, everything's done by hand.
Ooh,
Really?
Okay. That's impressive, honestly.
Wild.
That really is. Okay. What's the best meal after a really brutal day in the field?
Best meal? I would assume one like in an actual restaurant with an actual fork. Those typically don't
That I did
happen.
not have to cook. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Last one. Describe KB Custom in 3 words.
Okay. Leading it like cutting edge. Well, that's 2 words, but okay. So
We'll take it as one.
Okay. Cutting
It's
edge.
hyphenated.
So cutting edge, customer focused, and high intensity.
I like that one.
Those
like
like
that.
6 words.
We'll take
That's
it.
okay. We hyphenated the other 2. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
That's all
right.
my rapid fire questions.
Do you have anything else you would like to share with us?
The only other thing I want to say is that I think that people in our space really do have to get involved in their industry organizations, right? Their councils, and they have to get to Washington, D.C. Like,
yes.
I cannot say enough that regulators have to understand what each regulation does to their business. It's not enough to just work hard anymore. Like, you got to be vocal, you got to be articulate, and you got to put in the elbow grease.
Is there anything exciting happening or coming up for KB Custom that you want anyone to know about?
I think this is a year that's tough for everybody, right? And so I think the exciting things are going to be about keeping people, optimistic and curious and, thoughtful in a year that's not like any other year. So, for us, I mean, there's always like something new and exciting, but I think this year it's going to be a lot of teamwork, right? To address this year that's unlike any other. So I'm looking forward to all the heads around the table.
Okay, as we talked about today, agriculture takes a lot more than what most people see on the surface. Behind every operation, there are people making decisions, managing risks, solving problems, and helping keep things moving forward every day. This conversation was another great reminder that women in ag are shaping this industry in more ways than people realize. That wraps up today's episode of The Parallel Path. Thank you for spending some time with us. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to follow the podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss the next episode. And if there's a topic or guest you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time on The Parallel Path.